My name's Phil Condon. I'm a professor in the Environmental Studies program at the University of Montana, and I'm real pleased to be able to introduce an old friend who I call Bob Pyle, but when you read him, you know him as Robert Michael Pyle today, who will be reading from several books and also doing a question and answer, and we hope to have a good discussion with him. And he's an ideal person to have a discussion with because Bob is really a Renaissance man, in my view. He's published 12 or 15 books. He's a lyrical writer. He'll read some poetry today, perhaps some nonfiction, and he's also a world-class scientist. He's a lepidopterist that consults all around the planet about issues of butterfly life. He founded the Xerces Society for, what is the subtitle, for invertebrates, the conservation of invertebrates. He founded that in 1971. It's still going strong. And as I say, I think in most of the continents he's done consulting work about these things. He's written many books about butterflies, but he's also written landmark books about place, wintergreen in the late 1980s, about his home country in southwest Washington. It won the John Burroughs Medal for nature writing, which is about the highest award for nature writing that is given. And since then, he's published many more books. I got to know Bob 14 years ago, I guess it was. He came here to do lead the Environmental Writing Institute with students, and then from that great experience and how much students loved him, we invited him to be the Kittredge Distinguished Visiting Writer in the Environmental Studies program in 2006, and he was here for a whole semester, and it was just kind of an indelible experience for our students and for the community because he got to know a lot of local naturalists. He did things at the Montana Natural History Center and did some nature walks and if you've ever taken a nature walk with Bob, it's an experience in itself. He's great working with kids and butterflies, with people, educating in all kinds of ways. So I won't go on too long. I am supposed to thank, besides the Montana Book Festival, I should thank the Montana Natural History Center for sponsoring Bob's visit to Missoula. Maybe some of you were at the event last night over there. That was a great conversation, and with Annie Gard, who's here. Anyway, it's just my privilege. I think you're in for a real treat to introduce really one of the premier nature, place, species writers in America today, Robert Michael Pyle.
Thank you, Phil, and for coming to do that in the middle of your environmental writing conference. That's remarkable. Good afternoon. Ride on, big gray dog, ride on. Ride on, you long metal box on wheels. Ride on, ride on. Ride on, people of the alleys, streets, and farm towns, you mothers with small children eating baby Ruths for dinner. Ride on. Ride on, old man with useless legs, losing your pants as you slide down the steps for a smoke when the rest get out for theirs. Ride on. Ride on, you scarred black man, blonde woman, so loud, your profane repartee so loud in the back of the big gray dog where you found a refuge and an entourage. Your laughs so loud and cackling in the dark. Ride on. Young roofer who asks me for pen and paper and draws tattoos, almost speechless, hungry, downing chips and Coke on my $2. Ride on. Ride, handsome boy with a journal, never out of Oregon to your fiance in Florida. Ride, old hippie with a clubfoot and braces. Ride, you goateed philosopher dumpster diver with heroic BO, reading Umberto Eco and telling your grinning seatmate about the Old and New Testaments and how Jesus loved Mary Magdalene, him telling you about CIA sex slaves. Ride on. Ride, dog, ride. Ride to the sordid lean-tos, squalid stations, the Denny's, the McDonald's, the Baker City truck corral, where the drivers always have the same tables and waitresses. Past ride through heavy rain and moonrise, heat and sunset, past fawn pronghorns and white pelicans. Ride, you old woman with 2 coats who wants to buy lipstick and gets up for your stop hours early every time, blocking the aisle. Ride, you young woman with heartburn who gives the old one your lipstick and cradles your silent, hungry child. Ride on, you consternated patient drivers with your service pins and gray pressed suits and weary patter, remembering the strike and the snipers and dying to retire, who change in Denver, Salt Lake, Boise, Portland. Ride on, ride on, ride on. Ride, night dog, ride, day dog. You man with the small girl who slept barefooted and pillowless on the bare, dirty floor in the chaos of the Denver depot, who holds her now in the back among the loud, coarse, happy riders, ride on. You young pretty mother with 2 little boys and dirty pillows going all the way to Michigan, ride. And you bawling babies heading 3 nights to some other place, ride on, and on. Ride on, you teenage girl, in long black velvet gown with tattered hem and no shoes, met by 2 police cars in Ogden, smiling and waving back at your new friends. You people who joke about the drugs you've known and don't have, who rush out at every stop into spontaneous combustion of the drug you do, ride on. Ride, roofer, ride. You weepers, ride, roofer, ride. Ride, writer. You weepers, laughers, coughers, ride. All you who ride and ride and ride the big gray dog. Ride on, little Latina, your mother across the aisle, your brother behind, your sweet brown head pressed into my side. Ride on. Good afternoon. Before I speak, I have to use my laptop. I apologize for that, but my laptop is a old timber cruiser's bag, and it. Do you know what timber cruisers are? People who cruise the forest to estimate the board feet of the stumpage, as they sometimes call it, the trees, otherwise known as, and but other things too. Many qualities of the forest are discerned by a perceptive timber cruiser, and they carry these cool bags and they strap on their belts, and you can't get a beer or a sandwich in there, but you can get your maps. And I found that this journal I bought at the Portland Saturday Market 7,000 years ago fit exactly in the timber cruiser's bag that I bought because I so admired the first one I ever saw. So it works on my lap really well in a tree. Yesterday on a Doug fir that you'll hear about later, east of town, it worked on my lap perfectly and the battery didn't run out or anything. Thank you Montana Book Festival for having me here. We've talked about it for years and I've wanted to be here. And thank you Montana Natural History Center for sponsoring me and for our delightful program last night. Delightful from my standpoint, can't talk about anybody else. But my interlocutor in our conversation was Annie Gard, who's in the back of the room, and Annie had me on her wonderful, iconic, beloved Pea Green Boat show years ago when I was in town. So what fun to a reunion for that, Annie, and thank you for doing that so gently and smartly last night. Such fun. And thanks to everyone else who actually is here, because there's so many good things going on right now. Not just in this building, not just at the festival, but in Missoula, for God's sakes, on a pleasant autumn day. So to have a room of lovers of land and language here like this today is extremely invigorating to me. Dear friends in the room, others giving programs as we speak right and left, and a pleasure to be here. One of the premier naturalists of Missoula, Brian Williams, is in the back, and he was a student of mine here years ago. And he's not only a wonderful writer, but an absolutely superb naturalist and teacher of natural history to the young, and what could be more important than that? I want to give a special thank you before I start reading to my publisher. I'm so happy to have Christine here. Christine Holden is the publisher of one of the most respected poetry publishers in the country, if I do say so, and that is Lost Horse Press in Sandpoint, Idaho. Beautiful books, and I could not be luckier to be published as a poet by Lost Horse. Came about delightfully because one of the other poets, I think a fine poet that she publishes, Maya Zeller, who's here at the festival, was a girl in my valley when I grew up. And she would come over to our house, and Tia and I would maybe give her lunch or lemonade, and then she'd bring her poems, her girl poems. And they were delightful poems. They were a young girl's poems, and we talked about poetry, and I gave her some books of poetry to read, and so on. She started broadening her approach to poetry. Went to Huxley at Western Washington University and graduated, and then came. Did she go to Moscow, or was that Jeannie?
Eastern Washington.
It was Eastern. That's right. She had actually was accepted, I think, both at University of Idaho and at Eastern Washington. But she went to Jeannie and worked in Spokane with various wonderful writers there, and then she published this splendid book called Rustfish, and she's now teaching at Gonzaga. But it was, and she calls me her first mentor, which is very sweet. But her publication of Rustfish, that book won the second place, I think, that year in the Idaho Poetry Prize, which is what encouraged me to send my manuscript to Lost Horse. And I didn't get as high as second place, but we worked it out anyway. And Christine published the first book I'm going to read from today, and the second one. So Christine, thank you for being here. And I want to invite you to visit us outside. Christine's table for Lost Horse Press, which is glittering with beautiful titles, is nearby, and I'll be at the table to vandalize any such books so they'll have no further commercial value. Now we have a good piece of time today, if I don't spoil it all by talking up front. And I am going to share with you a number of poems, but most of them are quite short, not as long as the one I just read. That's the longest. But it's going to be a little poetry sandwich, a little prose sandwich between poems. I'm going to read from Evolution of the Genus Iris, and then I'm going to read a short prose piece from Skytime and Grays River, and then I'm going to read some poems from Chinook and Chanterelle. And then we're going to have a Q&A and discussion, conversation. I like to say conversation. And then I'm going to close and send you out of here on time with a poem that I wrote for you yesterday. I know I said that to the people in the Natural History Center too, so I wrote it for them too. But and I passed out this postcard. If you didn't get one, please pick it up. I'm in a sort of a pre-promo mode for this book that's coming out next week from Oregon University Press. It's called Through a Green Lens, 50 Years of Writing for Nature. 50 years! It's a collection of my prose pieces, not from my books. We're doing a collection of those too, kind of a best hits from the books thing. But this is from my periodical serial pieces that have never been collected before. Over 50 years. The first piece I wrote the summer I got out of high school. It's never been published before, but it got me going on this. It was the first thing I ever really wanted to write. Didn't happen in school, but school taught me stuff. It never really made me want to write. When I got out, something did, and that's where it begins. I apologize on the postcard for a bit of a, I've coined a term, a neologism that I hope will stick. Hyperbole. Have you ever heard that before? And if not, why not? It's such an obvious word, because what genre lends itself to hyperbole more than the blurb? And this is a classic example, so it's not my fault. They put it on. But it's got a very, very cute vole on the cover. The designer for Oregon State came up with this nice green wreath for the title, Through a Green Lens. I wanted to call it bycatch, the stuff you get along the way that you weren't aiming for. But we ended up with Through a Green Lens after many tries. So we made this green lens out of green wreath, which was nice. But it was hollow. There was nothing in the middle. And I said, oh, so after 50 years, like I had learned or seen nothing? Oh yeah, maybe something ought to be in there. So they put a butterfly in. I said, no, not a butterfly. I've written all these butterfly books. No more butterfly. And then it was a monarch. And I said, certainly not a monarch, because I've done so much with monarchs. I didn't want it to seem like another butterfly book. So they said, well, you come up with something. And I thought about Wind in the Willows and Ratty, the wonderful Ratty, and Shepard's drawings for Milne that I love so much. And so, an artist I love in her work in Astoria, near my home, loved those drawings too. And inspired by Shepard, she did a vole for me for the middle. One of my friends said, oh, for 50 years writing for Nature through Green Lines, you ought to just call it 50 frogging years. But he didn't say frogging. And and another one said, just call it 50 Shades of Green. So of these poems I'm going to read you, I've got 4 Missoula poems, 5 Pussycat poems. Sorry, I don't have any pooch poems. I have a lot of kitty poems. Is that okay? And I have 1 war poem. That's all I can take today. And 3 or 4 or 5 sex poems. We'll see how that goes. Nobody laughs, so I guess I won't read those. This is the first Missoula poem. It's called Moonrise Redux, or Gone for Good. And some of you were there last night and heard some of these things already. Not too much repetition. This is while I was living just south of the university, teaching for Phil, with Phil. Moonlight Redux, or Gone for Good. 1. Coming down from Sentinel, walking the few blocks home past the notice on the telephone pole to watch out for the neighborhood black bear, I notice a bright light on the mountain. Some beacon I hadn't seen before? No, it's the moon, all full, just cresting the ridge. I have missed the moment of rising. 2, and then it hits me. I could walk back up the street, and the moon would drop again beneath the climbing mountain's flank. I can get the moonrise back after all. Strange at this late date that this should be news to me. So I backtrack and watch the moon rise thrice. That slow, cool fire spreading along the ridge until the silver rim appears, a hubcap in halogen, every blade of bunchgrass, each sprig of chokecherry etched against the mare tranquillitatis. 3. 1 month later, I come outside to find the next moon already up. But this time I know exactly what to do. I have to walk fast, but I catch it, just before it tops the summit of Sentinel. Imagine a chance to reclaim what's lost simply by adjusting your position vis-a-vis the mountain, the moon. 4. But in between these moons, fetched up on the Maryland shore, I wake ungodly early to watch the sunrise over the Atlantic. I hit the January beach in time, turn my back on the high-rise wall, and face the sea, the scoters. And then 2 women catch me in conversation until I turn and, damn, there it is, that mango fire already limning the eastern curve. Oh, I see most of the rise, that cerise tomato plopping up atop the wave, then yellow, then white, above the white shell sparkle of the beach. But I missed the moment of ignition, that second when the sea gives up the secret it doesn't know it knows, that neither the ocean nor the night go on forever. Going down again. As a man who sinks in water, I have never been gravity's friend in open air. I remember falling out of a locust tree at 10, stealing magpie eggs. Off bicycles, of course. Hard on tailbone in the Fox Aurora, tripped by a girl, and again on rock at Boreas Pass. From a ladder, raking my forearm raw on oaken bark. Stumbling over Logan curbstone, shaking the pavement with the force of my fall. And once almost over backwards under heavy pack on sharp pumice ridge in the dark divide. I never like pratfalls in comedy acts. Feel physical pain before butt meets dirt when it isn't even my butt. And for this reason, I clamber, not climb up mountains. For this reason, I go slowly over broken ground. It is good that my bones are like those of Titanotheres, the way my body craves the earth. Yesterday, in Billy Meadows, my foot found a stick, end on. Pole vault came to mind as I shot up, out, and down. Landed on cheek with crack. I took for bone or lens at least. Lay there, taking stock, then daubing a little blood, stood and shook it off. Happy, happy to be back up one more time. Silage. I wrote this a number of years ago about my valley, Grays River Valley. In southwest Washington, nowhere near Grays Harbor. It's a little tributary of the Columbia River, just about opposite Astoria and a little bit east on the Washington side. Silage for Bobby Larson, first farmer, first person I met in the valley 38 years ago. Writing letters on a January day, I miss the silage. Its sour stink, riding on the fog like a front man for rot. Its leaking heaps, seething beneath winter blankets of black plastic. Green chop is what they call the cut served straight up, field to cud without benefit of bales. And next comes hay, baked dry and sweet by autumn's breath, to greet damp muzzles with rumors of summer. Finally, silage. No fresh fodder, these ammoniac mounds, these fetid sediments, but magic, how bacteria's touch makes milk from sodden veg, months from any meadow. When the dairy herds left, so went silage, and its reek like a needle to the nose that shouts, "This is the land, this is real," as clear as any of this valley's voices. Oh yes, I miss the silage. Just look how I try to make my own from these neglected letters, composting correspondence. If only I could feed it to the cows. If only I could smell it. You can tell that was a pre-email poem. I was on a writing residency at the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology in a little cabin called the Tree House, and I was trying to get a lot of correspondence done that week too, and they were mounded there. So now we had 43 dairy farms in my county, Wahkiakum County, little tiny county when I went there in '78. There are now 3. The only surviving one in my end of the county is organic and doing well for Organic Valley. It's gone to beef cows or fallow or whatever. But now the places that are surviving and making a lot of hay out of our wonderful grass that's grown there are not making silage anymore, which is the rotted under black plastic. They're making haylage, which is a hybrid hay silage blend, and they have the big white plastic bound bales, and they're not very pretty, but inside there the controlled decay goes on, and it's a lot simpler for them than the big stinking mounds of silage, and transportable. I don't want to step on the cute vole. Rare worm. Rare worm doesn't spit or smell sweet. There really is such a thing as the giant earthworm. In fact, there are several species, one in the Palouse, one in the Willamette Valley, close to extinction, haven't been seen by many for a long time.
How big are they?
Well, I'll get to that. Rare worm doesn't spit or smell sweet. Now, this is on the occasion of a young woman at Pullman at WSU finding a population, the first that had been seen in years. Rare worm doesn't spit or smell sweet. Thus spake USA Today when the Palouse giant earthworm turned up again after 20 years of absence. Well, not really absence. They were down there all along, relaxing into their flaccid longitude, deep underground. Their cousins, the Oregon giant earthworms, had been missing even longer. Old lore said the Palouse giant earthworm smells like lilies. Old lore said it spits and stretches up to 6 feet long. Not so, said USA Today. These were only footlongs. No spit, no sweet scent. Kind of like finding Bigfoot and he's only 5'10" with 9B trotters. I don't know about the spitting, but what if you were lost for 20 years and then found and weren't the same as everyone expected? What if they all found out you don't smell like lilies after all? Well, there are 6-foot specimens, especially of the one on the west side, the Willamette one. And there are larger specimens of the Palouse one, maybe up to 3 and 4. But they, like other worms, they contract and expand a lot. And the ones they found were probably young ones. We hope the big ones are still there. It's not clear. Tillage and the changing of the soil profiles and chemicals have no doubt been responsible. And of course, the massive changes of habitats in the Willamette Valley. But there are some preserves there now, and they've saved some species that were close to extinction there, like the Fender's blue butterfly. So maybe the giant earthworm will ride again. I worked for the Nature Conservancy many years ago as the Northwest Land Steward, and we were going to have a campaign to find and save giant earthworm habitat. And our bumper sticker was going to say, "Save the giant earthworm. Can you dig it?" But we never did that. Okay. Have to get the war poem out of the way. The other night, Hillary Clinton was talking about the shootings of black men by police officers, and she said something that really struck me, just a word. She said, "It's unbearable." And it is, isn't it? It's unbearable more and more. But there's so many things that are unbearable. Aleppo, poor Mr. Johnson, I think he was just confused at the moment. If you want to really know about Aleppo and what it was and what's been lost, read Vladimir Nabokov's short story called Once in Aleppo. It'll break your heart. Anyway, so that's unbearable too. There's so many unbearable things, which I guess is why we're here, to try to find something bearable in the world. So this is called Pink Pavements, and it was actually written about Iraq, but you could call it Syria or any number of other places. Pink Pavements. How the sidewalks flush and run when cherries, crabs, and apples shed their petal pelts. How exploded blossoms soften concrete and stone. In Colorado, nights before track meets, I walked and walked, dreaming of Olympus, holding in the exhalations of fupa crabs that lined our streets. Next day, the same cold wind that always blew my discus down too soon would strew the streets with pale pink discs. In Cambridge, cherry blossoms daubed the rosy fronts of colleges, scented stale doorways of pubs. Memories of winters on harsh fen breath, stripped set fruits of flower, laid pink silk over ancient pavements, lifting skirts and dressing lanes in time for the May balls. Even now, when hard spring wind unclosed the cherries in town and crab apples thicken the night air, I feel the blunt rim of the discus on my fingers, the cool rim of the pint on my lips, and I think, as yet another April whiles itself away in war, how the pavements of Baghdad must go pink, spattered with the petals of peaches and plums when the car bombs burst, how blossoms soften exploded concrete and bone. Okay, enough of that. We've done due diligence, the agonies of the world. So a soft grace note, my first kitty poem was about my 20-year tuxedo pussycat named Bilak Bacchus. It was Bacchus, but not B-A-C-C-H-U-S, not the Dionysian Bacchus. But it's a New Guinea pidgin word. I worked in New Guinea for a while, and I didn't really learn pidgin, but I loved some of the words. And it's a construct, synthetic language like Swahili or Creole from Dutch, German, and a whole lot of native languages. And it works. That's their lingua franca in a country with 740 different languages. But it's very slow to express. There are only two prepositions, so it's kind of long, belong. It's very sing-song. It takes a long time to express yourself, which is one reason things change slowly in Papua New Guinea. Plus, they try to do things by consensus rather than majority rule. That takes forever, too. Anyway, the kitty was named for the word Bilak Bacchus, which means black box, which was a contraction for the word for piano, which is Bilak Bacchus, him got teeth all the same shark, you strike him, he sing out. Black box has teeth like a shark, you strike it, it'll sing out. Bilak Bacchus, him got teeth all the same shark, you strike him, he sing out. That's piano. And so we named our little black box of a cat Bilak Bacchus. And this is for him. It's called Hearth. When the fat black cat plants his sleek self on the round blue rug beneath the hot blue stove, he anchors this home to the earth. Okay, first sex poem. When you don't have a sunny day to hang the wash out, sometimes you hang the wash over drying racks, right? Over your heater vent. And one day, Tia and I were working at the dining room table, and she spotted something over in the corner. She said, "Look, dancing pants. The blue cotton panties and the white cotton briefs dance in the warm air of the heat vent, swing back and forth, up and down on drying rack bars. Perpetual motion in the nether regions, tireless. Don't their owners wish their pants would always dance like that at the mere lick of hot breath?" Early morning in Wyoming. What does one do with the outtakes from one's prose? Sometimes they become poems. There are 2 or 3 in these books that are outtakes from my books. My book, Mariposa Road, is a great big book, 574 pages or something like that. Written, however, in short takes, just the right length. Read on the can or when you fall asleep at bed. But it's a long book, way over what I was allowed in my contract. It's a whole year's road trip with a lot of low and some high adventure, so it had to be kind of long. It's tight, but it's long. But a lot of things came out. So this was one. This was a scene that I dearly loved. One morning, early morning in Wyoming, I had a little seep, a little boggy seep in the high desert. I had to pull out. 3 tall, slender sisters climbed down from the cab of a pickup pulling a horse box. They wear ball caps, 2 red, 1 brown, over long braids. Moving smoothly in form-fitting wool, willowy and shy. Barely notice the old-timer waking up in his jalopy. Offload 2 chestnuts and a gray. Lead them onto the range. Run them in circles by their bridles to warm them up. And then 2 bareback, 1 saddled, they mount. Shyness shed, self-possessed on horseback. Trot over the ridge, blonde braids flying, border collies bouncing. Disappear into the sage. 3 female centaurs loping off to do something ancient with dogs and cattle. I mentioned a writing residency. I was lucky to have several that led to the completion of the first book of poems. You really have to settle in somewhere without your other irritations and commitments, and writing residencies are perfect for that. So I had one at a place called Billy Meadows, referred to in the Going Down Again poem, which is a Forest Service place in the Blue Mountains of northeastern Oregon. And there was a workshop there called Outpost, part of the Fish Trap writing collective. The Outpost workshop is now held in the Zumwalt Prairie, but then it was at Billy Meadows, and the deal was you got a residency 1 year, and the next year you had to teach the workshop, pay the piper. And I lived in the old Forest Service Guard station. And I had this screen in back, and here's what happened. It's called Releasing the Horseflies. Every day I visit the half-screened back porch to let the horseflies out. Smart enough to get in, too dumb to get out. They wham against the rusty screen all day long. The horseflies are big and slow and easy to catch and toss out. The hoverflies, passive and happy to go. The smaller ones have to fend for themselves. I need a glass for the bumblebees. Well, why release horseflies anyway? Well, they're no skin off my nose or arm or neck if I watch out. Besides, I can't stand frustration in any animal, and a big fly battering a screen is the very definition of frustration. And, oh, their striped eyes are beautiful. Well, the next writing residency I had was again at the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology. I've had several there. I wrote my book, Walking the High Ridge, at one of those. But when I was back for the one working on poetry, I found the antidote to the unbearable facts of the world around us that keep us from touching the grace notes we need as poets and as people. This is called All Things Considered. Every night after writing, I'd walk. This is at Cascade Head, which was my favorite preserve under my management when I worked for the Nature Conservancy. It's north of Lincoln City on the Oregon coast at the mouth of the Salmon River, this big, beautiful headland. You've been there, Jordan. Habitat for the endangered Oregon silver spot butterfly, and just a beautiful place. And the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology is on the back side of it. So every night I walk down to the bottom and walk down the Salmon River to its estuary under the cliffs. This is called All Things Considered. 2 river otters fished the salmon, diving and rising side by side, almost down to the surf. Watching their sleek and pointy loop-de-loop over and over and over, I managed to miss the evening news. I don't know, should I read this?
Say, Robert. Robert, I have a suggestion.
Yes,
The grief of brushing.
thank you. I'll read that instead of what I was going to read. That's right, you wanted me to read it last night and I didn't. I was going to read a sex poem that may be a little raw for the afternoon. Oh, you want that too, do you? Okay. Got to watch the time a little because we do have the other stuff. The grief of thrushes. Where is it? Here, 6. Yes, Annie, I should have thought of that since you requested it last night. We didn't have time. Well, thank you. Some people will get mad at me. Also on one of the other kitty poems. But, c'est la vie. The grief of thrushes. When I saw the brown lump still between the gray cat's paws, I took it for a Townsend's vole. One of those great cat sausages, basis of the food chain in my valley. Their tunnels so hard on the garden. Take the voles, we say, and be content. Leave their gallbladders big as marbles for us. And leave the flying squirrels, the jumping mice, and all the birds alone. But this was no vole. It lay compliant but alive, struggling just a little. Cupped in my hands it seemed a sparrow, but the bill said thrush, oh kitty, not the Swainsons, who come in May and make of June evenings a madrigal of whistle, chitter, and tumbling trill. Not one of theirs. But it was. And here's the bad part. The mother, the whole time I held her young, she flew round and round the wood, calling, calling. That piping plaint carried on into the dark, round and round, long after I placed the chick on a pile of leaves. Its bill opened in silent answer, one leg dangling, one wing stretching, and then it died. As the cat looked around in disgrace, never mind her partial exculpation, discovery of downy feathers where the bird hit the window before the pounce. In the morning, eyes gone, snails streak, shimmering over wing. Still the mother circled and called. Just as I wonder, in an old graveyard serried with stones of 1, 2, 5, 6-year-olds, how the parents stood it. So too with birds. Not just a moment, no, just a momentary itch of absence would be the merciful thing. Most of their young, taken by cat or crow or coon. But who knows? If you'd flown 10,000 miles, found a mate, fashioned a nest, hunted down 10,000 caterpillars, only to lose it all to a cat at fledging, maybe you too would circle and keen, circle and keen. Thank you, Amy. So you really want this? Oh, okay. It's with the tongue deep in the cheek, and it's, no, never mind. It doesn't even have an F-bomb, gosh sakes. It's called If Humans Had Spermatophores. Now, insects and some other invertebrates deliver their sperms to the female in a little packet called a spermatophore, not in a fluid. And the spermatophore contains not only the spermatozoa, but also a nutrient reward for the female, which helps her to live longer, be more vital, lay more eggs, the eggs are healthier, and so on. Monarchs have come to an even more elaborate version of this, whereby most female butterflies resist secondary matings because the first spermatophore is all they need. And in fact, new spermatophores shut out the first one, and that's why the males continue to try to breed, get their genes in there. But in monarchs, only the first spermatophore survives, but the females, if I may say, solicit additional matings, but the additional spermatophores are forfeit strictly to their nutrition, and their sperms die. So it's called sperm piracy. It's very progressive. If humans had spermatophores, zygotes would be ziplocked, gametes gift-wrapped, chromosomes contained in shrink-wrapped valentines. If germ cells merged this way, sperms delivered in packets of promise brighter than anything from burpees, it would be impossible to spill your seed. If men made spermatophores when they shot their wad, there would be no wet spot on the bed. Rubbers would be redundant, since cum would come in cellophane. If love arrived in shiny bubbles, prizes packed in sheer balloons, genes seeking genes would ply the deeps in silken submarines. And birth, that would be a burst of butterflies. Wasn't too bad. I got to get on here. Funny things happen. In spring, the starling in the stove. Again, the banging in the stovepipe that says starling has taken chimney vent for nest hole. Clangs and batters till you wonder how she can take it. A butterfly net over an open hole in the wood stove shows her the light. She finds her way out into the net, even blacker than before. In my hands, her feathers greasy with soot, she cries bloody murder, makes such a racket you'd think she'd gone from the stovepipe into the fire. Once back in the clean blue air, she bumps a window, leaving a smudge, and then rockets away, trading this bad dream for the open air. She's a cheap chimney sweep, you say, and I say, good, knowing another one will be back next spring to brush away another winter's creosote. And the last poem from this book today is what it's all about and what Brian's doing and what Richard Louv wrote about in Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. It's what I write about in my book, The Thunder Tree. It's about our special places and trying to keep the young connected to the land. This is called The Girl with the Cockleburs in Her Hair. It's not a Nordic noir novel, like all the girl novels from Sweden. We were talking about how children don't get out anymore. She showed me her daughter on her cell phone. Big pout and 4 big burrs caught up in her hair. That girl, I said, is going to be okay. Now, probably fewer poems than I intended from, no, I promised you this prose piece. I'm going to read you just the culmination of it. It's about bats and how bats will get into your house. And a lot of people don't like that. And they react to it crazily. Our governor had bats in the governor's mansion, and they debatted the mansion and told everybody in the state, if you have a bat in your bedroom, get rabies shots at about $1,000 a pop, you know. But I start this saying, again, last night I awoke from a dream into the certain awareness that was something with us in the bedroom and that it was softly flapping around and around. And when this happens, I rise, fetch a butterfly net, and help the bat back into the black night. And I've often had to do this at places where there's a bat indoors, and I have my net with me, and they say, save us from the bat. And sometimes I've done that in cafeterias with a lot of students at nature camps, and I'm going out with the bat, and they're all going, na 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 na, Batman theme. Once in a woody cabin in the Rockies, a bat got into someone's cabin, and a person came into the lobby of the lodge where I was riding by the fire and said, it's bad, we've got a bat. And the lodge owner was going to send him back with a can of Raid. So I went, I'll take care of it. I went, I got the bat, and I released it happy as a gnat to be back in the night air. And in the morning at breakfast, they said, the professor saved us from the bat. I said, no, I saved the bat from you. Well, anyway, I had a bat in the house, and it was on the windowsill, and we thought it was dead. We came back from our trip. We had a crack in the window, and it was dehydrated. But when I put a little moist paper towel by its mouth, it put out its petal tongue and took a little moisture. And it was alive, and I gave it a little more and a little more, and it was definitely alive. So I put it on my hand in a glove. I'm not that cavalier about rabies. And I took it outdoors. And I put it on a big mushroom conch on the side of an oak. And I came back later, and it had crawled down underneath it and it's hanging there after it's fashion of its kind. But if that is too weak to fly, it's still going to die because it can't fly. So, along about dusk, seeing the bat was still there, I began to worry it was too weak to hunt. It had managed to crawl a little way, but could it fly? So I took matters and the bat in hand again. With my free paw, I grabbed an insect net. And together that bat and I prowled the garden, sweeping the vegetation for small prey. The first item I tried to feed it was a grass moth, which I held with forceps in front of the bat's face. It made feeble nips, but couldn't handle the moth. I tried again with a gnat, and the bat managed to get the insect between its minute, sharp teeth and swallow. Next, a midge, which went down a little easier, and then a crane fly, and by then the bat was looking around for more. Here, let's try a grass moth again. Got it. And so it went as we collected together, the bat growing stronger and more interested with each insect, its face powdered with pale moth scales. Soon it was lunging at each proffered dainty with zeal. And when I tried a bigger moth, the bat's natural prey after all, that miller vanished faster than a Vienna sausage tossed into a kennel at kibble time. 6 or 8 more times we did this. The light was fading. The little brown bat lay across my gloved palm, belly down, foxy little ears straight up, nose twitching. And then it drew its wings in toward its body, and in the blink of a bat's eye, it lifted off from my hand and became one more dark form against the night sky. Now, last 2 poems, and then we'll have some discussion. Chinook and Chanterelle was my second book of poems. The first book contained a number of poems of dread and fear for my wife's cancer, and this one, she had passed by the time this book was published. And it's dedicated to her, to the memory of Tia Linnea Pyle, the best chanterelle hunter ever. And she was, and it's her beautiful print of chanterelle and Chinook on the cover. It's also been printed on a big broadside of her print in this poem. So the book and the poem are dedicated to her. A number are for her. There's some grief poems in here, but it's not a grief book, it's not a sad book, but there's poems I will not attempt to read to you. There's one I tried, I thought I could do it at Bread Loaf this summer. Well, it wasn't just me, the entire house was having their catharsis that night, so I guess it had a value, the fact that I totally lost it. This one's called Chinook and Chanterelle for Tia. What gifts these are from river and woods, these coral ones, muscled strumpets plucked from the fisher's nets where the shrunken runs still shine. And these golden ones, fluted trumpets pinched from the forest floor where the second growth hemlocks still stand. Surely we are unworthy of such as these. But if enjoyment of succulent flesh is any mitigation, if the tongue's fierce possession of taste can be extenuation, if the way we chew and praise and slurp and swallow and say it, worship this fin and stipe, these silver scales and meaty caps, can sing the hard shimmer in the stream, can cry the soft glimmer on the mossy floor, can save us. If these gestures make any difference whatsoever, well, then maybe we deserve them after all. Okay, here's the Missoula poem 3. Oh, I forgot Missoula poem 2. That's all right. It was called True Story. It was about driving from here back to Grays River, and I was at the rest area near Coeur d'Alene, and I was walking in the little nature trail, and I bent down and I picked up a tuft of bunch grass just to feel it, but it came away. It was actually a bunch of ponderosa pine needles. So, dummy. So I went walking on, and later I went to pick up some ponderosa pine needles and to smell it, and I picked it. It was hooked on. It was bunch grass. It's a silly little poem. You didn't need to hear it. Called True Story. But this one is I think, is definitely a Missoula poem, although it's also a Sandpoint poem. And it's part of a collaboration I'm engaged in right now with a musician who also happens to be the master of our country Grange and the founder of our farmers market. Unusual situation for a person who was a co-founder of Nirvana, was the bassist of Nirvana, grew up with Kurt Cobain, was his best friend, and won the Grammy last year for the best rock record with Paul McCartney and Dave Grohl, is the master of our Grange in Grays River, Washington. And he plays music locally, and then he goes away to make big music, and he comes back and plays his acoustic guitar at Grange. And we started collaborating on writing some songs and poems together to read at Grange. One of them's on YouTube. It's called Notes from the Edge of the Known World. You can check that out with the cool natural history video that Chris made. But we've now got a dozen of them, and we're finishing the recordings next week, and it's going to be released as a CD this winter. And this is the second piece in the collection. It's called Gretz's Flood. I can't duplicate Chris's beautiful guitar song for this. But you know about the Gretz's floods, the Missoula floods, the melting of glacial Lake Missoula, and the great floods that swept out the Columbia Basin. But they're called the Bretz floods now by many people because J. Harlan Bretz was the geographer who first came up with the idea that this happened, and everybody said, nah, that's stupid. And when it was proven that his hypothesis of the formation of the Columbia Gorge through the Missoula floods panned out, many people now call them, in great justice, the Bretz floods. So this is Bretz floods. And I was walking on the river walk yesterday, as you'll hear in a moment, and saw the interpretive sign about it. And they've got it right. It starts in the furnace of the core, rises through the mantle's crush, makes the crust, then breaks on through in plutons, vents, volcanoes. Dike swarms leak across the land like Vaseline on hot skin, congeal in lava flows called Rosa, Elephant Gap, and Rattlesnake Ridge, Umatilla, Pomona, and Sela. Flow, then freeze in lichen daubed entablature and colonnade, marmot-guarded angle of repose, all the way to the sea. After Pangea, continents surfed the crusted waves, broke their backs against far shores, forging the shapes we know. Plates of the shelf, shoulder plates of the land, bunched them up in the middle, raised the Rockies from nothing more than force and dust. Where mountains crumple upward before crumbling down again, a moment comes when, high enough, they tempt the snows that crown the years, and then press and press and press some more, till glaciers start to move. As cold goes south, the ice sheets grow, till half the continent goes under. Polish, scour, lathe, and grind leaves sign of ice on granite domes, the scream of ice on unforgetting stone. Rivers drain the glaciers, but Clark Fork is plugged. 2,000 feet of ancient ice, 200 miles of inland sea, then warming and melting time after time for 1,000 years until some month or minute when the dam breaks through. And then glacial Lake Missoula is loosed upon the land. Down pours deluge, downhill, downgrade, down map. 10 times the flow of all the rivers of the world. Cut the coulees, channel scablands, carve basalt like old black butter, even gouge that great green slot that we will call the gorge. Slash Grand Coulee, swamp Dry Falls, shoot Wallula Gap, whack Beacon Rock, shatter the very bridge of the gods before they're even named. Never so much water, sluicing to the sea with such a force of will, sloshing from wall to black rock wall, from rim rock to rim rock 400 feet deep, until, the ice all gone, the river finds its level, never looking back at the havoc it's left behind, where all that remains is geology. And the way that one came about is Chris and Kurt never had time to go to college in their Nirvana days, but Chris is a restless intellect, and he did go to college, and he graduated with honors recently from Washington State University in pre-law, and online mostly because it's hard for him to be in a classroom because the kids still see him as a big icon, as he is. And And he took a geology class that he really loved. And he had such fun with it, he said, let's do our next song about geology. So that's the geologist. You can imagine how weird this entire project is for me. It's very strange. But it's sure fun and new. Well, I've, of course, mouthed too big for my reach, but I want to read you one more kitty cat poem, and then we'll have some conversation. And send you off with the last Missoula poem. I think I'd like to read you the poem called Metamorphosis or Sacrament? Well, I could just summarize Metamorphosis. We got two new little black kitties after Bacchus, Bo and Bentley, and I came home from a job and Bentley was gone. Only Bo came out, and a gray shadow passed on the porch. And a couple days, and Bo was terrified, and a couple days later I heard coyote puppies yapping down the bank and happy in the sun, and a litany of kitties that went off to join the coyotes before. But ultimately it was realizing the metamorphosis, the transmogrification of kitten into puppy. So instead of that one, I will read you the kitty cat poem called Sacrament, or Kitty Brings Supper. So yes, you'll get mad at me about this one too, probably. My kitty really is a mammalogist, almost always catches deer mice and voles, but there's one particular bird that, well, you'll hear. Sacrament, Kitty Brings Supper. Band-tailed pigeons, do you know the beautiful native band-tailed pigeon? Not hunted anymore because they're not that common, but they're big. Very popular bird for hunters previously. Band-tailed pigeons darken the sky this year, as they used to say about passenger pigeons. Flood through oak to tall oak, stuffing acorns like popcorn. And then, disturbed by the slamming screen door, erupt again, snowing small white feathers. Now Kitty mostly devils voles, leaves the birds alone, but has caught pigeons before. This one he brings inside, decorates the dining room like the aftermath of a pillow fight. After all that, eats just a bite, leaves the rest for me. A little more plucking, a bottle of Pinot Gris, a hot skillet. Liver, heart, the gizzard with its acorns, big purple breast, plump little drumsticks, all with leeks and butter. What a bird, the bandtail. What a cat. P.S. Today he catches a mole half his size and brings it to me. Thanks, Kitty, I'm good. I'm sorry, I'm a bad person, but it seemed like a Missoula poem. It's for R. Laveau, former student of mine, too. And I do have one for Jordan Fisher-Smith that it'd be my last poem before our conversation here. I'm leaving a little time for it. This is Jordan Fisher-Smith, who's going to be in a session tomorrow afternoon with Seth Kantner at Les Petites Outres, right? Or whatever it is.
Right.
Something like that. And Jordan's a wonderful writer of books like Nature Noir, which I love, and various others. But this is really for you, and it's also my my poem about Malheur. The Malheur occupiers are on trial right now as we speak, right? And they were misguided. They may have had their ethic and their desires, and even some. Everyone's frustration is valid, but their methods certainly were contrary to our great passion for our public lands, that we should do obeisances to FDR and LBJ and everybody else who has always fought for our public lands. And Jordan's been a public servant on the public lands, the state parks of California and elsewhere for a long time. So you're my token honoree for this, Jordan. It's my Malheur poem, but I wrote it years before Malheur occurred. and it pretty much speaks to my view of how blessed we are by the lands around us. Upon obtaining my Golden Eagle Pass, 51 weeks I'd been 62, so why hadn't I done it yet? Never mind. Carmen, she of the pretty name and face, was happy to sell it to me in Asotin. Senior Pass, it says, on a picture of cactus flowers, and on the other side, lifetime pass to all the federal recreational lands, the refuges, parks, forests, and all the rest. Golly, I say, and hail, hail to the public lands, those who make us rich beyond measure in rocks and waters, birds and flowers. $10 for life. There's never been a better bargain. Thank you for your service, Jordan, and all your colleagues, even though you work for the state, not the feds. So maybe, pardon?
I work for all of them.
That's true. You work for every agency under the sun. Are there some questions or comments or complaints about my having a cat that goes outside sometimes? Nothing?
Well,
Yes, sir.
I'll ask you, you read the point about the girl with the cockabird, a couple things you said reminded me of two essays that I've used in classes, The Rise and Fall of Natural History, and also your phrase, I think it's your phrase, the extinction of experience,
Right.
and the dangers or the risks of that for young people. Anything you want to say around that?
Sure. Thank you very much for asking that. Phil, there are certain ideas that have, I think, energized, that's a not very pleasant word, but moved me to do things that I've done for a long time, tried to do anyway, and one of them is Vladimir Nabokov when he said, "Is there not a high ridge where the mountainside of scientific knowledge meets the opposite slope of artistic imagination?" Yes, there is, and that's where we all want to be. And George Eliot, when she talked about the other side of silence and how if we paid attention to everything in the world, we'd go stark raving mad, driven crazy by all the sounds on the other side of silence. What a beautiful phrase that is. These ideas stick with us. Well, one idea, I think if I've contributed one phrase to the lexicon or the conversation that a lot of people have told me have helped to them to form some of their ideas and to nurture and give strength to some of what they're trying to do in conservation, it's been this phrase, the extinction of experience. And I'm honored that that has come into the conversation as much as it has. And also the rise and fall of natural history. Those two essays are quoted a lot here and there and used in schools. And the point of them, and they're not new ideas with me particularly. Ian McHarg said some things kind of similar to the extinction of experience, the diminished baseline. But that idea came to me when I was dealing with the very first extinctions I ever personally witnessed. Local extinctions of butterfly populations along the Highline Canal in Colorado, which was my birthplace as a naturalist, my escape hatch from the suburban grid, and where I discovered natural history, and I owe everything to that ditch. The book, The Thunder Tree, is about that, and Richard Louv kindly says that it was one of his foundations for Last Child in the Woods. And a chapter in there called The Extinction of Experience that is where I tried to come to terms with losing these little populations of things here and there. When you lose something right on the city limits, within the city limits of Missoula, or just outside, well, it's in some ways almost as important as whole-scale extinctions, insofar as the young or anyone else is not going to be encountering them in their own radius of reach. And your radius of reach, which is smaller for the young, the ill, and the poor, is what really forms our experience. So unless we encounter these elements of diversity near us, where we actually spend time, then existentially, I guess you could say, though I never use that word in the essay, it might as well be gone. And people become inured to the grace notes of the world when they don't encounter them. And when they become inured, they become apathetic, and that leads to further extinctions. And so the extinction of experience is about a cycle that's particularly vicious. And I've seen it happening. I've even quantified it in one paper. I even put some numbers to it once. having to do with the extinction of urban butterfly populations that we actually had some data for, and some measured effects. But you don't need the numbers because we can see this happening all around. So I continue to be motivated by the extinction of experience and trying to provide antidotes to it in everything we do in conservation. And the original version of that essay, which is less fleshed out and more just right there, is going to be in the Green Lens book. It was published in Horticulture magazine in 1978. And then it was years later in the Thunder Tree when I fully fleshed it out. And then the Rise and Fall of Natural History was in Orion first, and that's going to be in this book too. But it's about the purge of the naturalists from the universities. That never quite came to full fruition here or in certain other campuses, but certainly this campus, with all of its different resource departments, did experience a hardening against natural history with the rise of hard science. That really started between the two world wars and hit its apogee with Sputnik and the space race and the arms race, when everything came down to hard science. Not to say that we haven't benefited from many things from hard science as well as been heard by them, but we need that too, obviously, but it's a baby in the bathwater situation when you throw out the old farts with all the facts in order to bring in the young Turks with all the tools, as I say in the essay. So that essay is about trying to maintain the values and the presence of natural history with a hard mind to get it right and get it rigorous in our communities. And Brian Williams is the embodiment of that in Missoula. And not only he, but the Natural History Center and everybody else that goes outdoors on the path. So thank you, Phil. Those are important ideas to me that I continue to try to act on myself, and I try to bring them to people in my writing and my poems. I've been writing more poems lately, and I hope the poems are full of those ideas as well. Are there any other questions? Jordan?
You've now published an anthology of your Orion writings, and I've often thought about what the community aspect of Orion meant to all of us.
That's right.
Was that important in your career?
Immensely so.
Can you talk about how Orion and that community of writers has formed you or affected you?
Thank you. Does anyone know about the Orion Society that publishes Orion Magazine? Do you know that? How many know Orion Magazine? Okay, if you don't, check it out. It's at better newsstands, and it's certainly in the EVST library, and I hope the public library. It's a magazine without advertisements. Its subtitle for a long time was People in Nature, but I think they finally kind of got it that forms its own dualism that's not necessarily one we want, and so I don't even know if it has a subtitle now, but it's always about the interlinking between humans and the rest of nature. And it's rich in literature, in reportage, but it's not really a journalistic thing. Most of the pieces in it are essay, though some of them are very full of fact and you could say campaigning, but there's also fiction and poetry and remarkable graphics, photographs and paintings in every issue. So I urge it upon you. But around Orion Magazine formed a community. Now, the very first Orion was a tabloid newsprint book review, and I wrote for it back in the 70s. And when they got the first big grant from the Mirren Foundation, which had to do with the smallest beautiful people, they were going to go slick and form a new magazine, and they wrote to the various reviewers for it and said, what should this magazine be? And I said, it should have a column every time. I was influenced by Stephen Jay Gould, in natural history. And I was a young writer. And I said, and it should be me, and I want to call it The Niche of a Naturalist. And they went for it, astonishingly. This is in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And so I'm in the very first 3 issues of Orion. But the column failed. It died soon after that, necessarily so. It had too many cooks. Everybody had a different idea for my column, and I was only one voice. And you can't be an essayist that way. The first one's okay, it'll be in the collection. The next 2 were Dog's Breakfast. And it died, and I was pretty glad. But sad. And so I didn't have much to do with Orion for years and years and years, until they gave the first John Hay Medal to John Hay himself, the great dean of New England nature writers. And I was invited to that, and I met a bunch of people important to my life there. That led to the Nabokov's Butterflies book, that led to various other things, but it led to my sort of, after the Cultural Revolution in China, people were, rehabilitated. I was sort of rehabilitated with Orion because I got invited on what they called the Forgotten Language Tours, which were barnstorming tours of writers writing about people in the rest of nature, nature writers, if you want to call us that, nature being everything. Poets and essayists and fiction writers who would, a group, 5 or 6, would travel to a given region, get together with some local writers and go to colleges and bookstores and churches and pubs and nature centers and give readings, take walks, give workshops. And it was a wonderful thing. And I got to go on 12 or 15 of those in every part of the country, including Hawaii with W.S. Merwin. And Terry Williams and Barry Lopez would show up for parts of these, but Scott Sanders and David Duncan and Rick Bass and Richard Nelson and Patty Ann Rogers, Allison Deming were people who were on a lot of these. Jordan, you were on one. You came to lunch at my house on one of those when that was in Portland, right? Weren't you at lunch at my house on that one that went to Portland?
I was indeed.
Yes.
We ate off of Darwin, China.
We ate off a piece of dinnerware owned by Darwin's and his wife. Yeah. So that was all fun. But the community of being with this shifting cast of writers over and over and over, and then the giving of the John Hay Medal every year was another gathering to Gary Snyder or W.S. Merwin or to Wendell Berry or to E.O. Wilson or to Jane Goodall or to Homero or Regis. All these people received the medal, Barry Lopez, Ann Zwinger, and they would have gatherings too that I got to mostly go to. And then the magazine, publishing in the magazine and hanging out there sometimes.
And then Watershed.
And then Watershed and Fire and Grit, a big gathering of writers and activists at the Library of Congress called Watershed. It was stunning that Robert Haas hosted as poet laureate. And then one called Fire and Grit.
Matheson was there.
Pardon, Matheson was there. And Snyder and Barry and Terry and all those rhyming people. They were the varsity and the rest of us were kind of the JV, you know. And Fire and Grit at the National Conservation Training Center. Big readings, lots of they didn't call them breakout sessions, they called them collegiums. And such energy came out of this, and it radiated around the country. And that's all gone now, with the change of staff and less money available at the institution, and some of the grant money pulled back. And the magazine is still superb, but there's nothing of that left. But I was so lucky, as you were and some others of our colleagues, to ride that. And it really, in many ways, I think, was the great central thing in my career. And then I had the extraordinary good luck in the rehabilitation at the Gary Snyder Award in Nevada City of being taken out for a walk by Marianne Gilliam, the publisher, which usually, when he took me out for a walk, he was usually going to spank my hand for reading. Oh, would you be surprised? Reading too long in my readings. But no, he wasn't saying that. He said, Bob, you know, we're starting a second magazine called Orion Afield that's really going to be about community, and we want to have a column for it. And I said, yeah? He said, we'd like you to write it. And I thought, oh my God, you know, rehabilitation. Not that the failure of the first one was ever considered my fault, but still, you know, to be asked back. And so I wrote a column for 52 consecutive issues, 5 years of Orion Afield, and then it was folded into Orion, called The Tangled Bank, from Darwin's great phrase about the tangled bank and the wonderful final paragraph of The Origin of Species. And those columns were, they weren't tossed off columns. They were, you know, everyone took months of fruition with the wonderful editor Jennifer Sohn. And one of them, when she was on, two of them, when she was on maternity leave, were edited by Ina Niemela, who was my editor for the very first one all those years ago. So it came a nice circle. Those columns made, I think, really improved me as a writer, I like to think. They certainly helped me. And they were my MFA in concision for writing the shorter piece, which is why my 575-page book is written in 1,500-word takes. And those essays were collected in a book called The Tangled Bank, Oregon State University Press. That was my first collection. This is the second. There's a third one coming from the books, and the fourth one of longer essays that is going to be called, of all things, Nature Matrix. So that's that. Any other questions? You had one back there. Was there a question in the back?
I think Annie had one, but
She had to go. Okay, do you have time for me to finish with the poem I wrote for you? I'm sorry to keep you, oh gosh, 10 minutes too long. I've done worse. Ask Phil. I took a walk yesterday And this is the fourth draft. It's always risky to read new stuff in a reading, but you're friendly. It's called Back in Missoula. Let it be the walk that you didn't take today in order to come to hear me instead. Thank you all again so much for coming. Back in Missoula for the Book Fest. Reading last night, Union Club. The gods duly invoked, Hugo, Kittredge, Duncan was there, and Robert Lee, and a covey of godlets to be. Whiskey was drunk, words spoken, cheers rendered, 200 pies consumed. Declined this morning, good company for a walk. Along the clock fork, wanted it quiet. Footbridge, signs about Missoula floods, about cleaning up Milltown where Hugo used to drink. Far enough along Kim Williams Nature Trail, past construction and kids on day release, most of the runners, riders, walkers left behind, comes quiet. Here only rivers, cascades, and kingfishers, chickarees and flicker, one dee-dee-dee, one single syllable of some migrant's warble, and obligatory whistle of a train heading up canyon. Coloring up just after equinox, mountain ashberries bright burn, roan, creek dogwood, broken yoke of box elder, scarlet fingers and night blue fruits of Virginia creeper, juniper berry juice on one thumb and forefinger, cottonwood balsam on the other. Can almost still smell it. Sweet and bitter yin and yang, absinthe and gin. So many sensations out here past town. Hidden from path by cherry thicket, juniper grows from base of old Douglas fir, holding its thick butt with its ropey roots. Fir sticks out at the river till trunk straightens up, makes flat, broad lap, squirrel midden. It says, sit here, take a load off, write a poem or something. And who am I to resist? 3 female mergansers lay up against a rock in the Clark Fork below. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. So honored by your presence here today. And Phil, thank you again, dear man, for that wonderful introduction. So good to see you and Celeste and other friends. Be happy to now scratch on any books out there you might like.